Welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa, and in today's video, I want to help ease your mind about retirement. This is especially if you're in your 30s or 40s, and especially if retirement feels like this abstract, nebulous thing that's so out of reach, it feels like it's so far away. I'm going to do this by demystifying what retirement actually means and also walking through a practical step-by-step guide to start planning for it. And no, the tips in this video aren't like your usual max out your 401k or max out your Roth IRA, because I honestly don't think those are sufficient tips to make you less worried about retirement. And guess what? While they might be good strategies for some people, those are very specific strategies that don't actually work for everyone. Now, I know firsthand how difficult it is to feel confident about retirement and about financial security because no one has ever taught us the basics. What is retirement? How does it work? To be real, I didn't actually understand this concept of retirement or how you can actually plan for it until I took a graduate level class on retirement planning. It was part of my education to get my CFP certification. So I don't blame you if you've never taken a class, if you've never learned about it. It makes sense why it might feel very vague. If you feel behind in life, in finances, in your retirement plan, first and foremost, you should know it is not your fault. Our generation, I'm speaking of me, I'm 38 years old, so a lot of us in our 30s and 40s started off our adulthood in debt. A lot of us were convinced and pushed to go to college, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with getting a degree, but we had to pay for college at higher rates while wages didn't keep up with inflation, and so a lot of us started our careers making relatively less than generations before us. So we start off adulthood with more debt and making less money. So that creates this bigger obstacle for us to overcome. Despite that, despite these big obstacles, know that there is a world where you can retire according to your own goals and your own wishes. So again, the goal of this video is to break down retirement, demystify it, make it feel less abstract and more achievable, and give you some guidance on how you can start planning if you haven't yet. As if there wasn't enough stuff in this video, I also have 2 bonus tips at the end that are going to help you on your journey towards financial freedom and retirement. First off, what is retirement? I said I wanted to demystify retirement, so I want to start with the very basics. What exactly is it? Because we throw out this term all the time. We talk about retirement, we talk about retirement accounts, we talk about what we want to do when we retire. But at the same time, it feels like this vague thing that is so far away, and a lot of us aren't even sure if we're going to be able to do it. So I want to break this down into 3 different definitions of retirement. The first one is the dictionary definition. So if you look up in the dictionary, it's going to say something like this. Retirement is defined as the act of leaving one's job or ceasing to work. So it's essentially going from spending most of your time earning money and working to no longer having to work for income. It's no longer a necessity for you to work because you have enough money to live on. Second definition is what I call the government definition. So I think that retirement can look slightly different depending on where you live, because the government wherever you live basically sets the stage of how it works. So in general, retirement systems usually rely on a mix of public programs, so think like Social Security here in the United States, employer-sponsored retirement plans, so think of things like 401ks or pensions, and personal savings and investments. So this is when you're putting your own money aside for long-term savings so that you have money later on when you're no longer working. So in many countries, there are government systems that sort of define what financial support you're going to have once you stop working, and they determine at what age you can access those benefits if you qualify. So before I dug more into retirement, I used to just think of retirement as an age, right? It's somewhere later down the line in your 60s or later, because a lot of people are working later into life. And that's because I defined retirement based on what little I knew and on what the government said retirement was. For example, in the United States, we know that we can't access most of our retirement accounts without penalties, without tax penalties, until age 59 and a half, or that we can't claim Social Security benefits until our 60s. This government established definition of retirement, it often leads us to assume that we're just going to keep working and working and working for decades until we hit those benchmarks, until we hit those ages. So this government definition of retirement is what I'd consider the traditional form of retirement, which we're going to come back to later on in the video. Now finally, this is my favorite, number 3, the third definition of retirement is what I call your personal definition of retirement. So retirement nowadays is less about a specific age, but if you think about it, it's about freedom, specifically financial freedom. It's your ability to design your life on your terms, using your time however you choose, and not having to worry about money. For some people, this does equate to traditional retirement. They're cool with working until they can retire and access retirement accounts, Social Security, etc. But for other people, it might mean retiring in their 30s or 40s or 50s, or taking mini retirements throughout life. We're going to come back to this later on in the video, but I just want you to know that retirement is no longer this one-size-fits-all concept. It's not just this thing that's in your 60s and has to do with retirement accounts. The reason I'm spending so much time on these definitions is I want you to not be afraid of the word retirement. I want you to start thinking about it strategically. I want you to start thinking about it in alignment with what you want out of life. You could be in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but you still have time to make changes and work towards your version of retirement. Now, I don't think that watching this video alone is gonna make you wake up tomorrow and feel 100% confident about your retirement, but I want you to know that if you feel behind on your retirement planning, maybe you haven't even started saving for it, what you need to know is that the only way to worry less about retirement is to start with a plan. So rather than avoiding it or pushing it off as something to do later, I want you to start feeling excited about what retirement could look like for you. It sounds cliche, but we want to think about what does that ideal retirement look like. Knowing that is going to motivate you to create a plan and stick with your financial progress and your financial journey. All right, now that we've broken down what retirement actually means, I've given you 3 whole definitions, let's dive into more of the step-by-step process to start planning for it. I'm going to cover 6 steps to plan for retirement. Step number 1, imagine your ideal retirement. I just mentioned it, but before we even talk about numbers, before we talk about accounts, I think that you have to think about, what do you want your retirement to look like? Different types of retirement have different strategies and approaches with your finances. That's why earlier at the very beginning of the video, I said that I don't technically like when people on the internet say,
max out this account or that account.
Because that could be a good strategy and a lot of times is, but if they don't know what your retirement goals are, it's hard to tell you the exact perfect place on where to put your money. That's why a lot of us financial experts say that this is educational content, but if you really want to know what's perfect for your situation, you have to talk to a professional who can look at your exact situation. That said, let's talk about some examples of different types of retirement. The first, I mentioned this earlier, traditional retirement. For the most part, this looks like working until your 60s or 70s, until you have some government support, and then you stop working entirely. There's also semi-retirement, which is when a lot of people transition from working full-time to not working at all, and that transition typically looks like part-time work. Rather than just not working altogether, you work part-time and you free up some of your time, and you use that phase to start transitioning into full retirement. There's also early retirement. A lot of times this looks like retirement in your 40s or 50s. In some cases, if you have a lot of luck and privilege and a lot of money, you can even do it earlier. And then there are these newer forms of retirement people refer to as mini retirements or sabbaticals. So this is when you take extended breaks from working during your life and during your career. Sometimes these breaks could last months, sometimes they could last years. Some companies sponsor sabbaticals so that you could stay employed during that time off to reset and recharge. But a lot of times people do it on their own. They'll leave a job altogether and then figure out where they're gonna work later on after they're done with their sabbatical. All right, let me get real with you. Now, as I went down that list of different types of retirement, some of you, not all of you, some of you out there may have thought some things to yourself like, I wish that would be the dream. There's no way I could ever do that. It's too late for me to plan for that. So let me say this. All those things, if you did have any of those thoughts, that is scarcity thinking. But again, it is not your fault. A lot of us weren't taught about personal finance, how to invest, how to plan for retirement, and a lot of us are subject to wider systemic issues that have made it very difficult for us to build wealth. So here's the thing. There is no such thing as too late or behind. Your past decisions don't define you, and you can still make decisions today that can work towards whatever you want the future to look like. But in order to do that, you have to actually think about what you want it to look like. So that's why in this step, I want you to focus on visualizing your ideal retirement. A lot of times I ask clients to think about this, like what would you want it to look like? How long would you want to work until? And sometimes I get pushback. They're like, well, realistically, I won't be able to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, for one moment, let's forget about realistic because we'll decide that later. We have to look at the numbers to know if it's realistic. And numbers can always change. So even if it doesn't look realistic now, you can change that. So for this step, think about what does a good life look for you? Matter of fact, don't just think about this, journal it. I'm very big on having a physical manifestation of your ideas. So journal this. Here are a couple of prompts to help. What age do you want to retire? Tomorrow or age 50 or never? Maybe you love working. Why do you want to retire at that age? What would it do for your life? How would it feel? What would you do with your newfound time? Hobbies, travel, family, or just rest all the time? Unfortunately, studies show that nearly a third of retirees face depression, and that's often due to losing their regular routines, their social connections, and not really having a purpose beyond their career. So before we get into the next couple of steps and talk about the financial side of retirement, I want you to take time to think deeply about what are your goals, what are your values. These are bound to change. Nothing is set in stone, but you need a starting point. You need an ideal scenario. All right, step one is a big one, but let's move on to step number 2. The next thing you want to do to start planning for retirement is not very different from what you should already be doing for your current finances, and that is to know your expenses. You should calculate your current expenses and estimate your future expenses. So in other words, you want to know what your pre-retirement expenses are and what your post-retirement expenses are. So let's start with current expenses. If you've been following my channel at all, you probably already know your monthly expenses because basically in almost every video, I talk about how important knowing your cash flow is. But if you're new here or if you haven't reviewed your cash flow yet, that is where you should start. I'm going to drop a link to a free spreadsheet in the description, and you can use that to help calculate your monthly cash flow, how much money comes in on a monthly basis and how much money goes out. Now, the more challenging question is, what will your expenses look like after retirement? This is an estimate. There's no way to actually know that, but you can make an educated guess because it gives you a starting point towards planning for retirement. So there are many approaches you can take. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Number one, you can use a rule of thumb. A lot of experts say that you can estimate 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income as your retirement expenses. So once you know what your current expenses are or your pre-retirement expenses, you can take 70 to 80% of that, and that's how much you'll need in retirement. Obviously, this is not going to work for everyone. If you plan to live a lavish retirement, you can't reduce your expenses. You might actually have to go up in the number. But for those who have no clue what retirement might look like, it gives you a starting point. Now, another way that you can try to calculate your future expenses is to do a category by category review. So you've done your cash flow, you have a budget or a spending plan. You can look at your expenses and ask yourself, based on each category, Is this going to be higher in retirement or lower? For example, housing. Are you going to downsize? Because that might mean your housing expenses will go lower. Or are you going to move to a different city or a different state or maybe another country? This goes back to step number 1, where you're imagining your ideal retirement. I didn't have that on the questions, but where do you want to be geographically, but also what kind of house do you want to live in? I have a little sidebar, but I have this dream retirement scenario where me and a couple of my best friends all live on the same block. We have our own houses or condos or townhomes, but we all live close enough that we can walk to each other's houses. So we're arm's length distance away. So we have our own privacy, but we're close enough that we could just pop on over to hang out. And I feel like it's hard to get that these days because people go their separate ways for their own financial situations. It's hard for friends, or even like I have cousins that I've always wished that I could live near, but we all have gone our separate ways. If we all had tons of money, it'd be easier to plan together about living in the same neighborhood. But anyway, little tangent. It's a little dream I have in retirement. Who knows? Maybe it can happen. Other categories that you can estimate are medical costs. These typically increase in retirement, especially if you're paying out of pocket or you might need additional Medicare coverage, but it really depends on your situation. Fun expenses. Are you going to travel more? Are you going to have new hobbies? Are you going to spend more time with family? Or are you going to just be chill so you won't be spending as much? It's going to be different for every person. So that's why you have to do this exercise yourself to figure out, are my post-retirement expenses going to be higher or lower than pre-retirement? All right, step number 3 to start planning for retirement. You want to calculate what your fixed retirement income is going to be. What I mean by this is when you retire, you are going to have various sources of income. The fixed income portion is going to be the total of your income sources that typically don't fluctuate. It's going to be a set amount. It's going to be an amount that you can rely on month to month, and that helps you plan the rest of your retirement out. Various examples include if you have an annuity, a pension, if you have a set amount of income from bonds or dividends, maybe rental income or other sources. It all depends on what assets you currently own or what you plan to acquire between now and retirement. Now, of course, what I didn't forget, especially for those of you in the United States, is government assistance. So, you've probably heard of Social Security. A lot of people in the United States are going to rely on Social Security as a part of their retirement income. If you've worked a W-2 job, then you've likely been contributing to Social Security through your paycheck deductions. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the nuance of whether or not you're going to be able to have an income from Social Security in the future, but just know that not everyone automatically qualifies. To qualify for benefits, you need 40 Social Security credits, and you earn those by working and contributing to Social Security throughout your life. Now, you can check how many credits you have, and you can also check your estimated benefit amount as of today by logging into the Social Security Administration's website. I just logged in the other day, and here's what mine looks like as an example. I have 40 credits, so I do qualify for Social Security because I worked at W-2 jobs for well over a decade and contributed to Social Security. At the moment, here's what my fixed retirement benefit could look like depending on what I earn the rest of my working years. Now, between now and when I can take Social Security, I don't know if that's going to change, but what you need to know is that this gives you a starting point. Having this potential number gives you an idea of how much income you're going to have in retirement and how much you're going to need to supplement it. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. If you're like me and you will be able to claim Social Security benefits, the earliest you can claim it as of right now is age 62. But if you claim it at the very soonest moment that you're able to, it actually reduces the amount that you get monthly permanently. It doesn't increase the older you get. And another thing that you need to know, this is a point that I've hit on a couple times earlier in the video, is if you're planning to retire before age 62, then you can't really factor Social Security income into your retirement planning right away. That means you're going to need another fund for your retirement expenses. That's why retirement planning is so personal and individualized, because it's going to depend on, back to step 1, what does your ideal retirement look like? Are you going to aim for your 40s, 50s, or are you going to wait till your 60s and 70s? That's kind of why it feels abstract and nebulous, because it's really hard to figure it out on your own, especially if no one has ever taught you. Now, according to the Social Security Administration, Social Security typically replaces about 40% of a person's pre-retirement income. So that means if your current expenses today, if you anticipate you're going to need the same amount in retirement, you're going to need to figure out how to cover that remaining 60%. Because unless you downsize your life in a major way, you're going to need more money to cover your life. Now, I apologize if you're not from the US and you're watching from a different country, but what you'll want to do is figure out what that system looks like in your country if you do have benefits, and dig into how much that will be starting at what age. All right, before we hit step 4, let's pause for a moment. I know this is actually probably going to be my longest video. I don't know. We'll see. But this video has covered a lot, and for those of you who clicked on this video because you're feeling anxious about retirement, it might already feel overwhelming, right? I gotta estimate my expenses, my post-retirement expenses. I gotta look into Social Security. I gotta know if I qualify, yada, yada, yada. It's a lot. So before we dive back into the rest of the steps, just your quick reminder that you don't have to figure this all out on your own. If at any point it feels like too much, know that there are resources and there are people who can help with this. I'm going to link a Bankrate article in the description that I found that's pretty recent, and it is 8 ways to get free financial advice. I haven't used all of these, but if you specifically check out number 7 and number 8, I'm actually a member of both of those. I'm a member of the Financial Planning Association, and I also volunteer at a nonprofit called Savvy Ladies. They have a helpline where you can ask a question and get matched up with a financial professional who can help you answer that question. If you can afford a financial planner or advisor, I think that's a great idea. But if it doesn't currently fit in the budget, you can try those free options in that link that I'm going to put in the description. All right, step number 4. Next thing you want to do to start planning for your retirement is you want to estimate the other portion of your income, the income you'll get from your investments. So remember the Social Security piece, or whatever that looks like in your country, or any other fixed income you might have, annuities, pension, etc. You have a set amount that you can anticipate getting on a monthly basis or annual basis. Now you have to estimate, based on how much you have currently invested, how much is that going to provide you when you retire. For a lot of people, you're likely going to rely on retirement accounts, whether that is an employer-sponsored account, like a 401k or a 403b, or individual retirement accounts, so think traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, but also, hopefully you're also starting to think about other investments as well. So this would be anything invested in a taxable brokerage account, or if you have other income producing assets, like maybe you own real estate and you're getting paid rent. The goal right now is to estimate how much income do these various accounts and various assets generate in retirement. So to do that, this is where things get a little bit complicated, but what you're basically doing is you're making educated guesses about all of these things. So 1, you're going to make an educated guess on how much you think you're going to continue contributing to your investments between now and retirement. You're also going to estimate how much you think your investments will grow over time. The actual number is going to vary because it depends on what you're invested in. Some people like to invest in more risky assets. Some people like to play it safe. So it's going to vary whether you are going to anticipate earning 8% on your investments, 10%, or much more. And then the other educated guess you are making is what we already mentioned earlier, and that is, what are your expenses going to be in retirement after factoring in inflation? And, we don't know what inflation is going to look like in the next 10, 20, 30 years. We can only guess based on what it has done in the past. So all of those things, all these educated guesses we're making about these various things, this is why retirement feels abstract, because we are creating a goal, we are creating a plan to achieve that goal, but a lot of it is based on estimates. A lot of it is based on things we're forecasting, and that ideally you're checking in on a regular basis to see if you're still on track. So here's the thing. You need to know that all of this sounds complicated, and it is. And financial planners or people who help plan for retirement, they use software to do these calculations because the calculations are very intricate, right? Some accounts you can start withdrawing from at age 59 and a half. You can start taking Social Security at 62, but should you at 62, or should you wait till you're 65 or 67 or whatever age? And the hope is you're going to have different sources of income. Income from your employer-sponsored accounts, income from your retirement accounts, maybe rental income, maybe you have business income, maybe you build up passive streams so by the time you retire you have additional income. This is a lot to track. So if you don't currently have a financial planner or someone who can help guide you through those detailed calculations, here is one approach you can take. It's not my favorite, but it does give you a starting point if this is all starting to sound very complicated. It is called the 4% rule. So what the 4% rule says is that you can withdraw 4% of your retirement portfolio when you retire, and then take out that same amount every year, adjusted for inflation, and you won't run out of money for 30-ish years, which is typically the number people use when they're planning for retirement, right? You retire sometime in your 60s, you got a good 30 years to live on that money. Let's look at an actual example. So let's say that you had $300,000 in your portfolio at retirement. 4% of that equals $12,000 annually, or about $1,000 per month. So that's how much you'd be able to take from that account and ensure that you don't drain it for the next 30-ish years. Now in the following year, you would withdraw $12,000 plus an additional amount to keep pace with inflation. So you see in this scenario, $300,000 would only give you about $1,000 a month in additional income to add to your Social Security amount. And for many people, depending on what you've estimated your post-retirement expenses to be, it may not be enough. So just knowing that, my hope is that this doesn't scare you into thinking you'll never have your ideal retirement, but instead, I hope it puts in perspective that you can reach the retirement you want if you actually look at the numbers and then start making day-to-day decisions to help you reach that. So I won't go into more detail on these calculations, but if you're interested in how the math works out and you want to start getting an estimate of what your investment income will look like in retirement, then definitely look up the 4% rule. But as a starting point, what you can do is make a list of all the different places you might pull money from in retirement. So if you have a 401k, if you have an IRA, if you have your own investments that you don't really know what you're going to use them for, you just know that you're investing for the long term, make a list of all those places and then start looking at how much more you need to put in those before you can retire. All right, let's move on. Step number 5. Once you've done that exercise and you have an idea of your total retirement income from all those different sources, again, remember, these are just guesses at this point, but they're educated guesses. This is going to allow you to calculate what is the gap between income and expenses in retirement. What is your income going to be in retirement? And what are your expenses going to look like? Are they going to be more or less than they are today? Once you understand what the difference is between these two numbers, you'll be able to see your gap. If you don't have a gap, if you already are going to be able to fund your ideal retirement at your ideal retirement age, then I guess what are you watching this for? Because it means you can retire. But more likely than not, there's a gap and you have to figure out how are you going to save enough money to provide that additional income when you do retire at whatever age that is. Once you know that gap, once you know that shortfall, you can move on to step number 6, which is to implement steps to bridge that gap. So if you've identified a gap and you're like, oh wow, as of right now, my retirement income is gonna be $3,000, but I need $5,000. I need to save more for retirement to make sure that I can make up for that gap. Then what you're gonna do is actually not very different from all of the other foundational personal finance topics I talk about on my channel. It's all of the things that will ultimately help your financial future. That includes increasing your savings rate, take advantage of employer retirement matches, Look into other income streams, whether that's temporary side hustles or freelancing or starting a business. Diversify investments besides just retirement accounts, because if you want to retire before your 60s, you got to plan for that gap until you can start dipping into those other accounts. Now, if I haven't made it clear throughout this whole video, let me make the takeaway clear. This video I actually think is less about the practical steps of calculating all the numbers, even though I touched on all of that. But again, like, I wanted to demystify this thing called retirement that feels so far away and that feels like a crapshoot. Like, yeah, I'm contributing to my 401k. I don't know if it's enough, but I'm gonna do it. So actually, another really, really quick story. For me, that's how it happened. That's how I built actually a couple $100,000 of net worth was in my retirement accounts, because I didn't understand it, but everyone was talking about it at my job, and they automatically enrolled me to have direct deposits into my 401k, and I just let it happen. There were some years I didn't contribute a lot, but there were other years that I maxed it out. I didn't know what that maxing out actually meant until later. So again, I have nothing against maxing stuff out, but to me, I didn't actually have a goal. I was just like putting money aside as much as I possibly could. There's no real downside to that unless your dream, your goal is to retire as soon as possible. But guess what? If you've done that, and if you've kind of like put money into retirement, not actually having a goal yet, it still sets you up for a great retirement, because you know that at a certain age, when you have access to those funds, those years are taken care of. You got the money to fund your life, your 60s and beyond. If you want an early retirement, it's about strategizing your day-to-day money decisions to save more and invest more, to fill that gap of funding your life before you can touch those other accounts. Am I making sense? I feel like I've said it like 5 different ways because I want to make it clear that there's a process to this. There's math involved, which I know some people hate math, but more importantly, there are actions you can take. All right, I'm kind of regretting saying that I had 2 bonus tips, not because I don't want to give you guys bonus tips, but because I swear I feel like this video is going to be really, really long. Okay, here are bonus tips to help you plan towards retirement and stick to a really achievable, successful retirement plan. Number 1, build an emergency savings fund. Even in retirement, you will need an emergency savings fund. So if you don't already have one, this is your first priority. If you build it now, not only does it give you that peace of mind and cushion right now in your life right now, but once you retire, it has the same function. Because one of the big worries people have in retirement is outliving their funds, and sometimes that's due to not knowing what their investments are going to return. They don't know if their investments will continue to grow and give them the income they anticipate. So if there's a market downturn or any reason that you're unable to withdraw a certain amount of money from your investments while you're retired, you have an emergency fund to get you by 3 months, 6 months, a year, however much that is, without having to touch those investments. All right, and the second tip and the very last section of the video, I already alluded to it earlier, but this tip is to get help when you need it. Don't be afraid to ask for help, to look for help, like free support, and don't be afraid to pay for help. If your goal is to build wealth, if your goal is financial security, you will likely need a team to help you manage your money at some point in life. You'll need an accountant or a tax preparer to do your tax filings. You might need to have a financial advisor help oversee your portfolio. You might need a financial planner who can help you with retirement planning. Or if you have a family, you might get a financial planner to help you with planning for education funding for your kids. I truly believe that many wealthy people don't DIY everything, and that's why in your financial journey, don't be afraid to invest both in yourself but also in your money team, the people around you, the professionals around you who are going to help you with your own particular situation. Retirement is a big one. All right, I hope this demystified retirement even a little bit. If you have additional questions, let me know in the comments, and happy to make videos on the stuff you guys want to hear. Until next time, peace out.